Normally 24 stand about that. One, if you let your cert lapse, you'll have to start all over again. Two, if you let your cert lapse, it'll still be on your transcript and you'll still have the badge. It's just the badge will show as expired, but it won't disappear, which I think is better than nothing. Lastly, there's a pro tip I have for you with regard to cert renewal. It's a free online assessment that you take at Microsoft Learn. It's a lot easier than the actual exam, believe me. Here's what I recommend. You earn your expert badge, you're going to have a 365-day or a 1-year validity period. When you've got 180 days left, you'll start getting email invitations to take your renewal for the DevOps Engineer Expert. I would suggest you take that online renewal as early as possible. It's free. You don't have to register. You can just pop right in and take it. It's open book. And when you clear that assessment, the renewal assessments are between 20 and 27 items. They're all multiple choice. There's no case studies or anything crazy like that. You'll be renewed not from when you take the renewal assessment, but from your original achievement date. You see the benefit? So now you've got another whole year plus that 180 days. So I always want to recommend that as a best practice for you if you're interested. Lastly, certification strategy. Let me see if this is still valid in 2022. So I'm recommending you do 104 first because you need those core infrastructure skills. You'll need skill in ARM templates and understanding Azure Resource Manager JSON. You'll likely see some PowerShell on your AZ400 exam, and you may also see some Kusto query language as far as monitoring and instrumentation goes. Now, as far as AZ400, you should understand it's not about programming. So you're not going to see any C# or Python or anything like that. You will almost certainly see PowerShell, and I'm so grateful Microsoft uprooted that because it's just too far afield of what we're doing in Azure DevOps, in my humble opinion. I've got some slides that go into the theory of DevOps, but we don't need to spend time on that, like I said. Instead, I'm simply going to go to this article in Microsoft Docs called What is DevOps? Because I think it's a great explanation. Check it out. DevOps is a compound word. You've got dev from development, software development, and you've got ops from operations, systems administration, for example, security administration, compliance, etc. And then DevOps being a union of people, process, and technology. Notice that it's more than just tools. It's more than just breaking down silos among job roles. It's more than just following a specific process to the letter. It's about the union of those things. What's the goal? To continuously provide value to your customers. What does that mean from a software development standpoint? It means that we're releasing software faster than we ever have before, but more reliably and safely than we have before as well. So I like that a lot. This is a good article for you to check out. And so as far as specifically this source code control, what are we concerned with here? Let me jump ahead past these DevOps slides. I'll just do a couple more slides, then we're going to go hot and heavy into demo land. The first module of Azure DevOps we're going to deep dive in is the source control component, and I think it's central. Why? Well, the idea is you've got more than one developer working on the same code base. And if your team is adopting DevOps principles, you'll not only have your application source code in that code base, but you'll also have your infrastructure templates in there. These could be Terraform files, they could be ARM templates, they could be Bicep templates, and they're defining declaratively the infrastructure that your code is running on. It's a beautiful thing to have that defined in source code control as well. Lastly, this whole notion of build and release automation or CI/CD, you'll see that we can keep our pipeline YAML in this code base as well. So all of these benefits you see on this slide, versioned files, automated workflows, collaboration, maintaining change history, all of these are realized with a source control system, not just for application developers, but for everybody on the team. Now, as far as an exam alert goes, you need to understand the two types of source control, what's supported in Azure DevOps. You've got on one hand, distributed source control. In other words, Git. That's what we're talking about here. And that's what the exam deals with is Git. Git means that you've got your Azure DevOps-based code base running in the Azure cloud, and then each developer or each team member has a full copy of that repository on the system. Now, that's a great thing for many reasons, because these developers can be anywhere in the world and work on that code without blocking anybody else's work. So that's really, as far as a top-line perspective, what's going on. Now, Team Foundation Version Control, or TFVC, is the other option in Azure DevOps. That is a centralized source control system. This is old school. Like earlier in my career, I remember working with software teams that used Visual Source Safe, which is the precursor of Team Foundation Version Control. And the issue there is there's a centralized network-based master repository. And then each developer, in order to do their work, has to have a connection to that source repository. And even worse, files are checked out on a one-by-one basis. And if somebody's got a file checked out and then they go off on vacation, you've got a blocking issue right there, don't you? So it's very difficult to, well, you shouldn't have to merge ideally because each developer has exclusive access to the files that they check out. But this is just really a 20th century idea. It's still around in Azure DevOps, in my opinion, just for legacy teams that have used it forever and don't want to move to a distributed model. I don't think you'll see any reference to TFVC on your exam. Okay, so let me clean up a couple of my tabs here. I've got GitHub up here. I've got, the Microsoft Learn blog. I guess as I'm driving by, I should mention this to you as well. In addition to having your AZ400 and Microsoft DevOps Engineer Expert pages bookmarked, another Microsoft Cert bookmark you should be aware of is Microsoft Learn's blog. They don't yet have a good DNS name, but they will shortly. I do know that. Just do a Google search for Microsoft Learn blog. This is going to be your source of authority for any announcements and changes to the Microsoft certification program. Now, the best case is that you can follow and subscribe to updates via email. But if you're coming to the page like I am, what I like to do is I like to use this filter and look just at announcements so I can see what's new and what's upcoming in the certification world. So that's an awfully useful website to be aware of. Okay, now from a top-line perspective, what do you need to know about Azure DevOps? Well, the idea is that you and your team, your software team, your operations team, you want a collaborative space to do your work, to do your software development projects. The situation. It's true that Microsoft owns both technologies. Azure DevOps is not going anywhere. It's going to be around for the foreseeable future, say at least another decade. As of now, the more feature-rich, robust, complete solution. GitHub, Microsoft is putting the bulk of their efforts into GitHub now rather than Azure DevOps, with the goal of bringing GitHub's offerings up to a level of parity and then beyond with ADO. But it's not there yet. I mean, GitHub started, as you probably know, with just source code control. But now it's got CI/CD and build servers with actions. It's got some task board kind of stuff built into it now. Of course, there's always been issues in all of this. There's some package management stuff now in GitHub. It's gradually expanding, but it'll still likely be a while before GitHub would be a direct replacement for ADO. So just want to let you know right off the top that ADO is not going anywhere. So it's not a case that you better just grit your teeth and go 100% with GitHub. In fact, you'll see in this training that you can definitely blend the two platforms. It's not even necessarily an either-or situation, okay? Now, what else about GitHub or Azure DevOps? How about if I go to Azure DevOps pricing? Normally, the Microsoft exams don't touch pricing because it's just too volatile of a subject. What I want you to see here is notice that there's two Azure DevOps products. The exam is focused with Azure DevOps Services. This is the cloud-based ADO that we'll be concerned with. Again, in earlier versions of the exam, Microsoft horsed around with Azure DevOps Server, and it was really annoying. DevOps Server is the on-premises edition of Azure DevOps. So for businesses that have security and compliance requirements or just organizational security requirements to where they won't use a cloud service, you can do the Azure DevOps server, but we're going to do services. And as you can see here, well, it's kind of dense. Let me just explain. There's a free tier that you can start with, and then if you go beyond that, you'll have to buy licenses on a per-user basis. So the free tier gives you one free Microsoft-hosted pipeline and one self-hosted pipeline, and you get a certain number of runtime or build minutes per month for free. As far as your users, you get your first 5 ADO users free, and then it goes beyond that. Now here's an exam alert. You need to know the license types for the users. Notice that there's basic and test plans, and see that there's a dramatic difference in price between those licenses, isn't there? Basic is the 90% scenario. The only time you'll want a basic plus test plans license is when you've got a QA person who needs to do dedicated testing work in ADO. And I guess that has kind of a premium price associated with it, all right? There are a couple other license access levels that we'll look at in the ADO portal, but these are the 2 paid ones. That's why they're on this page. Okay, so I just wanted to drive by that. Do you need an Azure subscription to use ADO? Yeah, I would say absolutely. So you're going to pay for your ADO subscription with your Azure subscription. So you're going to have to get familiar with Azure if you're not already. As you can see, I'm signed into the Azure portal here, portal.azure.com. And I'll go into my Azure Active Directory and go to my users list. So you're going to have your ADO users defined here in Azure Active Directory. And depending upon how much you know about Azure Active Directory, you can create your users directly here as cloud users. You can use Azure AD Connect to synchronize users from on-premises Active Directory. You can invite guest users in a variety of different ways. That's what's called Azure Active Directory business-to-business collaboration. But these folks here are going to be those who use your project. In fact, let's create a quick test user right now, and then we'll invite them into our ADO org. I'm going to create this user natively in the tenant, and I'm going to call this user Chris. That's fine. How about Chris at TW Dev Domain? When you start an Azure subscription, you have a unique name for the directory that goes on Microsoft.com, but I own TW Dev Domain, and I bound that to the directory to make my sign-ins more reasonable. I'll call this person Chris Jones. Chris Jones, auto-generate password. I guess that's fine. Let me copy that to my clipboard, so if we sign in as Chris, we can take care of the password change. I'm not going to do any additional privileges for the user here, but what I do want to specify is the user location, because in order to grant the user's licenses, we need to provide their geo. So I'm going to say United States, and we'll create that user here in the tenant. Okay, now coming back to Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps has its own management portal, dev.azure.com. And the way the object model works in Azure DevOps here is that you've got at the very highest level the organization. The organization is what links into your Azure Active Directory tenant and gives you your user base. And then within that organization, you have one-to-many projects. Within each project, you have various user teams that you can give access to the different components in Azure DevOps. And you've got the different components themselves, like Azure Pipelines and Azure Repos. But I want you to see that parent-child relationship from the organization to the project. Now, how you structure this depends upon how big of a business you have and how much complexity you can tolerate. I've seen huge companies with one organization and one project. And each team has a repo in that project, and they've got their own pipelines, and they go that way. That's going to give you one pane of glass from a governance perspective. You might go for one organization, and each team has a project. It totally depends on how you want to benefit from sharing and reuse and, DevOps is really about getting everybody on your development and IT teams on the same team, literally. So there's something to be said for the one organization, one project approach. Okay, so this is the ADO portal. I'm at the organization level. I'm at the top level. Mine is called Tim Warner Organization. If we go across the top navigation bar, we can see per user, because each user signs into the ADO portal individually. You can get to a quick list of any work items that have been assigned to you, any of your pull requests that you've been assigned or you created, and you can favorite or bookmark different elements within ADO. This shopping bag takes you out to the Visual Studio Marketplace. You should know that Azure DevOps is highly extensible, that there's Microsoft and third-party extensions the same way that your web browsers like Edge and Chrome and Firefox have extensions, like Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code have extensions. Azure DevOps has extensions as well. So if you're looking for unit testing, if you're looking for security, vulnerability scanning, whatever it is, you can come in here and see if there is a free or paid extension that you and your team might benefit from. And this API is open to where you can see this link up here, build your own. You can actually develop your own custom Azure DevOps extensions that plug into your pipelines and so on. So it's a nicely extensible platform for sure, as I was saying. So let me step back here. As far as setting up the organization, what do we need to know? Well, in the lower left corner, you see organization settings. There's a couple of these we want to pay attention to. One, we want to go to billing. I've already set up billing, but all billing does is you just choose your Azure subscription. And that way you won't be capped when you reach your free tier, okay? You pay for your subscription through your Azure subscription. And because, at least for this exam, we're going to assume that all of our ADO outputs are in Azure. Now, in the real world, do you have to deploy to Azure? Absolutely not. You can do your build and release definitions in ADO, but then you can deploy anywhere. You can deploy to Amazon. You can deploy to on-premises. Please understand there's not that walled garden concept. We're not talking about Apple. Okay. Full disclosure, I've got a whole bucket load of Apple stuff at home. I'm not banging on them as such. I kind of am, but anyway, what else do I want to show here? Oh, right. Users, right. So organization users is where you get your users, okay? And, we can add users in from our tenant, which I'll do right now. We created that Chris user, for example. What am I doing here? Am I in a different tenant? I'll have to recheck what Azure Active Directory I'm actually connected to. I think I'm connected to a different one that I thought I was. Let me try something here. Grab this Pat user. Selected user has been deleted. Yeah, this isn't working. Well, this is a good learning opportunity. Let me go back to billing, and let's do a change billing. Come on. And this will enumerate all of the Azure subscriptions that my current user has access to. Yeah, I'm connected to my Azure Pass sponsorship. Now, that should be the one that I want. If I come back into the Azure portal and go to subscriptions, I've got my Azure Pass sponsorship here. FC, yeah, it's the correct one. So I think that's okay. Let me come down. I think I know what the problem is. Here we go. So if we go under Azure Active Directory, I'm connected to the wrong directory. Yeah, I keep forgetting that you could be billing from one subscription that's part of one AAD tenant, but then your identity can be hooked into another AAD tenant, which is exactly what I've got going on. So what I actually want to do is disconnect from my TimW one. It's going to force me to confirm that because this is potentially a very breaking change. So let me paste that in. It's going to make me sign in again. And then I'm going to hook us back up into the correct tenant. Live and learn, right? Whoops, I don't want Okta. I want dev.azure.com. Yeah, and this is something else that I was confused at first. If you go to the Azure DevOps public page, it's not really obvious how to sign into the ADO portal. What I normally do is this here, sign in to Azure DevOps, and that'll take you to the sign-in endpoint. I don't want to create a directory. What is this? I'm a little bit concerned. Your account does not have access. Sign out and log in with a I think I might have hosed myself big time. It's okay. It's all correctable. Let's see. Pick an account. Oh, I don't know if I should have done that. We'll see. Okay. All right.